September 1944, Western France, near the Loire River. A German general named Bo Henning Schloiter faces an impossible choice. He commands nearly 20,000 German troops cut off, undersupplied, hundreds of miles behind advancing American lines. They can't escape to Germany, they can't win, but they can still fight and die for nothing. Schloiter makes a decision that will save thousands of lives. He's going to surrender his entire force. But this isn't just any surrender. It's happening in George Patton's operational area. And how Patton chooses to handle this massive capitulation will send a message to every other surrounded German unit in France. The decision Patton makes reveals a side of the legendary general most people never knew existed. A commander who understood that sometimes respect accomplishes more than bullets.
The situation is critical. We must act now. Understood. What are your orders? Hold the line. Coordinate with my staff. Yes, General.
The situation is dire. We must act.
I agree. We are ready.
This is the story of the largest German surrender to U.S. forces in Western Europe, and why Patton's response mattered far beyond one general's fate. September 16, 1944. The situation for German forces in Western France had become catastrophic. After the Allied breakout from Normandy in August, Patton's Third Army raced east across France at speeds that shocked even American commanders. German defensive lines collapsed, supply routes were cut, entire regions were bypassed as American armor drove deep into French territory. General Bo Henning Schloiter commanded a mixed force of German regular army units and support troops in western France. These weren't elite combat divisions, they were occupation forces, garrison units, supply personnel.
Achtung! Vorwärts! Ein Gleichschritt!
Men trained to hold territory, not to fight mobile warfare against American armored columns. And now they were completely cut off. The Loire River was at their backs. American forces controlled all the crossing points. Patton's tanks were between them and Germany. French resistance fighters were hunting isolated German units. Allied aircraft dominated the skies, making any large-scale movements suicidal. Schloiter faced three options, all of them grim. Option 1, try to fight their way east to reach German lines. This was militarily impossible. His troops weren't equipped for offensive operations. They'd be destroyed by American air power long before reaching safety. Option 2, disperse into the countryside and conduct guerrilla warfare. This would prolong the fighting but accomplish nothing strategically. His men would be hunted down one by American forces and French partisans seeking revenge for years of occupation. Option 3, surrender. For a German general in 1944, this was more complicated than it sounds. Hitler made surrender tantamount to treason. Officers who capitulated faced execution if they fell back into German hands. Their families could be punished under Nazi Germany's ruthless policies. But Schloiter was a professional soldier, not a Nazi fanatic. He understood military reality. His force had zero strategic value. Continuing to fight would kill thousands of men, German and American, for absolutely no purpose. The rational decision was clear. The question was, could he make it without dishonoring himself and condemning his men to mistreatment? Schloiter made contact with advancing U.S. forces through intermediaries. His message was straightforward. He commanded approximately 20,000 German troops who were willing to surrender, but he needed assurances about their treatment. This wasn't an unconditional surrender. Schloiter wanted guarantees that his men would be treated according to the Geneva Conventions, that the surrender would be conducted with military formality, that his soldiers wouldn't be handed over to French forces who had every reason to seek revenge against German occupation troops. The request reached commanders in Patton's Third Army. This was Patton's operational area. Any major surrender had to be approved by him. Patton's staff brought the proposal to him. Some officers argued they should demand unconditional surrender with no conditions. Why negotiate with a defeated enemy? Patton saw it differently. 20,000 German soldiers removing themselves from the war without firing a shot. That was an opportunity, not a problem. Every German who surrendered was one who didn't have to be killed. Every unit that capitulated was territory that didn't need to be fought over. Accepting Schloiter's terms cost nothing and gained everything. But there was a deeper strategic calculation in Patton's thinking. How you treat surrendering enemies influences whether other enemies choose to surrender. If German commanders knew capitulation meant humiliation, torture, or execution, they'd fight to the death. If they knew surrender meant proper treatment according to military law, they'd choose survival when the situation became hopeless. Patton approved the surrender. He ordered his subordinates to handle it according to the laws of war. Treat the German soldiers as prisoners of war, entitled to protection under international conventions. No special favors, no degrading treatment, just proper professional handling of a legitimate military surrender. The message this would send to other surrounded German units across France was worth far more than whatever satisfaction might come from humiliating defeated enemies. September 16, 1944, near the Loire River. Nearly 20,000 German troops, an entire division plus supporting units, marched toward American lines in formation.
They were disciplined, organized, moving as military units rather than a defeated mob. At the head, General Bo Hennings-Schotter and his staff officers. U.S. Army units under Patton's 3rd Army Command accepted the formal surrender. The process was conducted according to military protocol. Schotter formally announced the capitulation of his command. American officers accepted the surrender professionally. The German troops were disarmed, organized, and processed for transport to prisoner-of-war camps. Schotter and his officers were treated as what they were, enemy combatants who had chosen honorable surrender over pointless bloodshed. This wasn't charity. It was adherence to the laws of war that governed how professional armies treated prisoners. But the distinction mattered enormously. American soldiers processing the prisoners treated them firmly but correctly. German soldiers who'd expected harsh treatment or summary execution instead found themselves being fed, given medical attention if needed, and processed through established POW procedures. The contrast with what they'd feared was stark, and word spread. Within days, other German units across France knew what had happened. A German general had surrendered 20,000 men to American forces, and everyone had been treated properly. No atrocities, no revenge, just professional military conduct. This was exactly what Patton had understood would happen. Patton never met Schotter personally. He wasn't present at the surrender. He didn't give special treatment beyond what the Geneva Conventions required. But his decision to approve the surrender terms and ensure proper POW treatment had strategic consequences that extended far beyond September 1944. In the following months, German units across France surrendered in increasing numbers. Some were small, isolated garrisons. Others were battalion or regiment-sized forces that laid down their arms when they realized continued fighting was pointless. American intelligence officers noticed a pattern. German commanders specifically requested surrender to American forces. They had heard that Americans followed the laws of war and treated prisoners properly. Schotter's surrender became the example. German officers mentioned it in surrender negotiations. Word had spread through Wehrmacht communication networks about the general who capitulated with 20,000 men, and everyone was treated correctly. This had concrete military value. Every German soldier who surrendered was one fewer enemy to fight. Every unit that capitulated was territory secured without battle. Every commander who chose surrender over fanatical resistance was American lives saved. The cumulative effect shortened the campaign in France and reduced casualties on both sides. Patton's pragmatic decision to treat surrendering enemies according to military law created conditions that encouraged more surrenders. It was strategic thinking operating at a level most commanders never considered. But there was something else in Patton's approach that reveals his character. Despite his aggressive reputation, Patton genuinely respected professional soldiers. even enemy ones. He despised Nazi ideology and had no mercy for SS units or hardcore party fanatics, but professional Wehrmacht officers who served according to military tradition, Patton saw them as fellow warriors who happened to wear different uniforms. When those professional soldiers made the rational decision to surrender rather than die for nothing, Patton believed they deserved to be treated according to the laws that governed honorable warfare. This wasn't sentiment, it was Patton's worldview. Wars were fought by soldiers following orders, and when those soldiers chose honorable surrender, they should be treated honorably. After surrendering, General Schotter and his troops were processed through normal prisoner of war channels. Schotter spent the remainder of the war in American POW camps. By all accounts, he was cooperative and conducted himself as a professional officer who'd made a difficult but necessary decision. He was treated as enemy officers were supposed to be treated under international law, detained but not abused, separated from enlisted men but provided appropriate conditions. After the war ended, Schotter faced a different kind of trial. The German government put him on trial for surrendering his command. Under Nazi military law, capitulation without fighting to the last man was considered desertion or treason. But the post-war German court recognized reality. Schotter's situation in September 1944 had been hopeless. Continuing to fight would have accomplished nothing except needless deaths. His decision to surrender had been the only rational choice. Schotter was pardoned. He lived quietly in post-war Germany, avoiding publicity. When asked about his decision, he maintained it had been correct given the military circumstances, and he always acknowledged one thing, that American forces had treated him and his men according to the laws of war made the surrender possible. If he believed capitulation meant execution or torture, he might have felt compelled to fight on, not because he expected victory, but because military honor would have demanded it. The professional treatment he received from Patton's forces gave him the ability to make the right decision. Schweiter's surrender was one of the largest German capitulations to U.S. forces in World War II, nearly 20,000 soldiers removed from combat in a single action without a shot fired. The strategic value was enormous, but the broader significance lies in what it reveals about military leadership and strategic thinking. Patton is remembered for aggressive tactics, bold attacks, and relentless pursuit of the enemy. All true, but the Schweiter's surrender shows another dimension of his command philosophy. He understood that how you treat defeated enemies shapes the behavior of enemies not yet defeated. Respect the laws of war, treat prisoners properly, and rational enemy commanders will choose surrender when their situation becomes hopeless. Abuse or execute prisoners, and even defeated enemies will fight to the death because they have nothing to lose. This isn't weakness, it's strategic sophistication. Modern military doctrine has codified this insight. POW treatment, Geneva Conventions, laws of armed conflict. These aren't just humanitarian concerns, they're strategic tools that encourage enemy surrender and reduce the cost of victory. Patton understood this in 1944, 70 years before it became standard counterinsurgency doctrine. The decision to approve Schweiter's surrender and ensure proper treatment wasn't mercy, it was calculated strategy that happened to align with treating people according to established military law, and it worked. German surrenders increased across France as word spread that American forces followed the rules. The story of Bo Henning Schweiter's surrender teaches something that transcends World War II. In any conflict, the goal isn't just winning battles, it's ending the war with minimum cost in lives and resources. Sometimes it means destroying the enemy in combat, but sometimes it means giving them a rational alternative to fighting to the death. Schweiter faced annihilation if he fought, and honorable captivity if he surrendered. The choice was obvious, but only because Patton ensured the honorable option actually existed. If American forces had a reputation for murdering prisoners or violating the laws of war, Schweiter might have chosen desperate resistance. His 20,000 troops would have fought. American soldiers would have died clearing them out, and weeks would have been wasted on battles that served no strategic purpose. Instead, Patton's adherence to military law created conditions where the rational choice was surrender. 20,000 enemies removed from the war without firing a shot, territory secured without casualties, resources saved for the push into Germany.
That's strategic genius operating on a level most people never see. September 1944, General Bo Henning-Squider surrendered nearly 20,000 German troops to U.S. forces advancing through France. George Patton, commanding the Third Army, approved the surrender and ordered his forces to handle it according to the laws of war. No special treatment, no favors beyond what international law required, just professional military conduct toward defeated enemies who chose an honorable surrender. The decision saved thousands of lives on both sides. It encouraged other German units to surrender when their situations became hopeless. It demonstrated that American forces followed the rules, even when fighting Nazi Germany. Squider survived the war, faced trial in Germany for surrendering, and was pardoned when courts recognized he'd made the only rational decision available. The 20,000 men he surrendered went home to their families instead of dying in pointless combat. And Patton's reputation, already legendary for aggressive warfare, gained another dimension. A commander sophisticated enough to understand that sometimes following the laws of war accomplishes more than breaking them. This story matters because it reveals a truth about warfare that many people miss. The most effective commanders aren't always the most ruthless. Sometimes they're the ones who understand that discipline, law, and professional conduct are weapons as powerful as tanks and artillery. Patton knew when to attack and when to accept surrender, when to destroy the enemy, and when to give them a rational path to capitulation. That's not weakness, that's military leadership at its highest level. If you found this compelling, hit subscribe. We explore the strategic decisions that changed World War II in ways most history books miss. Comment below. Do you think Patton's approach to POW treatment was strategic brilliance or just following basic military law? Thanks for watching.